If you follow us on Facebook, you'll know that we regularly share quotes and inspirational thoughts that reflect our spirit here at Entry Point. A few weeks ago, we shared this one. It's okay if you fall apart sometimes. Tacos fall apart, and we still love them. The post received quite a few likes. One person asked me if the upcoming message that week was about broken tacos. It wasn't, of course, but the conversation inspired me to do some research and share some of those thoughts with you today. So I'll be honest, I was really hoping that nachos were the result of broken tacos. It would be a great analogy, wouldn't it? Tacos are pretty good, but when they fall apart, if it made nachos, those are awesome. Well, that's not the case. To prevent you guys from Googling it, I'm going to go ahead and tell you how nachos were made. Nachos were actually invented by Ignacio Nacho Anaya, who created the dish in 1943. He had to create a meal with only what he had available at home, so the original nachos consisted of fried corn tortilla chips covered with melted cheese and sliced jalapenos. And now you know, so you can pay attention to the rest of my message. Over the past couple of years, I've shared a bit of my story with you. My mom was married 7 times. My dad was married 3 times. They were both alcoholics, heavy smokers, and pretty unhealthy, mentally, physically, and spiritually. My brother Mitch was born in between marriages to my mom in 1953. So he was born out of wedlock at a time that was pretty unacceptable. My mom lived and worked in Chicago at the time and decided she didn't want him growing up there, so she sent him to live with a babysitter in another town about 2 hours away. This may have also been because of the judgment about her status as an unwed mother. I really don't know, but Mom only saw him on weekends. When my brother was about 4 years old, my mom met the man who would become my dad. She eventually married him, number 7, and my brother came to live with them and my dad's own mother, Lulabelle. So my dad lived with his mother when he was 42 years old. Actually, she lived with him. I really wish I would have asked more questions back then. So Dad was 42, never had any children, and in a relatively short time, he added a wife and a stepson to go along with whatever level of care he was providing his own mother. In my brother's eyes, he was ripped from a family he had grown to love with his babysitter and her own family, and then he comes to live with this lady who he saw on weekends, and the stranger who was her husband, and Lulabelle, who likely thought of him as a bastard child. Then I come along a few years later, and I'm my dad's only biological child, and I was a little princess who was adored and pampered. To be honest, Mitch grew up angry, hurt, and broken. Although Dad eventually adopted him, he doesn't remember either of my parents coming to any of his baseball games or any of his after-school activities, or really being involved in his life at all. So later on, I did tell them he may have lucked out on that because my mom did not miss an event, and she was drinking at the time. It was funny sometimes. As soon as Mitch could move out of the house, he did. He experimented with drugs, even moving to Arizona at the age of 17 because it was closer to Mexico and the drug sources. I know there were brushes with the law, possibly even formal arrests. Mitch didn't want to support the man, so he dodged the Vietnam draft and evaded paying taxes for several years. Growing up, I was told that if anyone called asking for him, namely the IRS, I was to say that we didn't know where he was. There were a couple of years when we actually lost total touch with him. Mitch was seriously broken. In Japan, there is something called kintsugi, which is referred to as the art of precious scars. It is the ancient art of repairing what has been broken. Fragments of a dropped ceramic bowl are scooped up and put back together. They're mended using a lacquer dusted with powdered gold that leaves the repair very obvious and visible. The repaired ceramic becomes a symbol of fragility, strength, and beauty. Tomas Navarro, a psychologist who wrote the book Kintsugi, Embrace Your Imperfections and Find Happiness the Japanese Way, talks about how, beyond its interior decorating roots, kintsugi has become a metaphor for life. Having spent 20 years as a counselor, Navarro was struck by how many people talked about feeling broken after enduring heartbreak, grief, or trauma. He shares that the kintsugi technique suggests many things. We shouldn't throw away broken objects. When an object breaks, it doesn't mean that it is no longer useful. Its breakages can become valuable. We should try to repair things because sometimes in doing so, we obtain more valuable objects. He explains that this is the essence of resilience. Each of us should look for a way to cope with traumatic events in a positive way. Learn from negative experiences. Take the best from them and convince ourselves that these experiences are precisely what makes each person unique and precious. I don't think I could have comprehended what this actually means until now, this very moment. I had to be at the maturity level I am now and have the faith that I do now to really understand that we become better humans when we come back from our brokenness. We become capable of a level of understanding and compassion that was not fathomable prior to enduring our own challenges. There's a quote from Stephanie Sparkles who says, "I love when people who have been through hell walk out of the flames carrying buckets of water for those still consumed by the fire." As I reflect on that concept, I realize that the insight, compassion, and understanding that I have received when life took an unexpected turn did not come from anyone who had a perfect life, but instead came from those whose lives were anything but perfect. Brené Brown calls out the image of perfection in her book, The Gifts of Imperfection. In it, she explains that courage, compassion, and connections with others are the keys to wholehearted life, or one of authenticity and belonging. Any image of perfection is just that, an image. She shares that it is imperative to understand our own self-worth to live happily. No one is immune to imperfections. We need help. We make mistakes. We outright fail. James 3 verse 2 says, "We all stumble in many ways." This provides even more support to the thinking that we are not all perfect. The Apostle Paul wrote a letter to the Philippians while in prison for being an agitator and a ringleader. So he likely had some stumbles of his own. As he wrote to the Philippians, it's in 3:13, he wrote, "No, I am still not all I should be, but I am bringing all my energies to bear on this one thing, forgetting the past and looking forward to what lies ahead." So no offense to God or James or the Apostle Paul, but Brené Brown says this in words I can understand. When we deny our stories, they define us. But when we own our stories, we get to write a brand new ending. My brother owned his story and certainly did write a brave new ending. He called me one day when I was about 25. He said that he was in rehab and he was working the steps and needed to make amends. He is still not perfect, but I do believe his imperfections are filled with gold. He is now in good standing with the IRS. He owns his own business and is an expert in flooring and cement in the Southwest United States. He invented a coating for shuffleboards and desert curling that, given the right care, lasts a lifetime. Shuffleboard and desert curling are huge in the Southwest. He once appeared in the background of Extreme Makeover Home Edition, where he was repairing some mistakes from a previous floor installer. He goes to Nigeria on a regular basis to consult on their faulty cement. Even more importantly, he doesn't hesitate to hire those who are broken, the homeless, former addicts, and others in trouble. He seeks them out because he gets it, and he knows that sometimes they just need a break. He holds them accountable because he knows they need that too. Their work sometimes takes them on the road for weeks at a time, where they work 12 hours a day and eat together and share hotel rooms. He says that gives them a lot of time to listen, to build trust, and to help them if they're willing. He also teaches English as a second language online to people in China and visits China to see his new friends quite often. He recently attended the Rice Festival, and there was a write in the paper where he was referred to as the white guy because he was the only white guy that attended. Like the examples of broken tacos and kintsugi, there are so many analogies to represent the value of coming back from brokenness to be more valuable and beautiful. A kaleidoscope is made up of broken pieces, but when you look through it, you see something beautiful. A broken crayon still colors. It takes broken soil to produce a crop, broken clouds to give rain, broken grains to give bread, and broken bread to give strength. There are other things that are even better when they're broken, like a piñata, glass ceilings, fortune cookies, water balloons, and awkward silences. But for every analogy, there are millions of real-life examples of people, even many in this room, who have become more compassionate, more understanding, and better humans because of their brokenness. I couldn't find anyone to attribute this quote to, but I'd like to close with this thought. One day you will tell your story of how you've overcome what you're going through now, and it will become part of someone else's survival guide. Amen.